Please welcome again Walter Salles. And we get the big bottles of Fiji water, who are a sponsor of the festival, so I thank them for that. Let me start with, well, I don't know if it's an easy question, but tell me about how you met Jia Zhangke and how you decided to make this film or convinced him to make it, just the process of deciding to make this film.
Well, first of all, thank you, obrigado. It was a great coincidence to start with. In 1998, we had films at the Berlin Film Festival at the same time. I had a film called Central do Brasil, Central Station. And thank you. And Jia had his first film called Xiao Vu, Pickpocket, which was also at the festival and won the forum. When I saw the film, and then immediately after that platform, I was completely taken by several things. Both films talk about that passage from adolescence to adulthood. I find it very, very difficult to register in cinema in a truthful manner, and I think he does that masterfully, incredibly, with such sense of respect and poetry for the characters. I have always the impression that Jia Zhangke's characters wouldn't be alive if he wouldn't be saving them through film. You see, so there's something about those early works that completely captured me. And then, as I said in the beginning, I continued to see his films and fell in love with Still Life, with Dong. And finally, he came to the São Paulo Mostra, which is, an important festival we have in South America. And I was invited to interview him. And I still remember the first question that I asked him. It was a public discussion with students. And I said, who were the filmmakers who brought you to cinema? And he said, Antonioni made me understand the importance of space in cinema. Bresson, the importance of time. And Hu Xiaoxian, who is going to be coming here, the importance of bringing your personal experiences into your films. And I think that somehow these three ideas, were guidelines for the work that we've done in China. Since that moment, I had the desire to do this film and a book with him, because we also did a book with Jean-Michel Frodon, a French critic who used to run the Cahiers du Cinéma, and he organized a book that we did together, based on this shoot. And such generosity, it's incredible. Such a generous, thoughtful man.
Yeah. So yeah, it seems like it was a long time in coming, but it was sort of a natural progression of your knowledge of films.
Only 8 years in the coming.
Yeah.
I have a certain tendency to do that in most of the films I do. It's just they take long to become a reality. But
and I love how, well, not only it seems, and it may be very easy to have him talk about his films and filmmaking, but his talking about his life, and he really opened up to you. It seems, I think, talking about all sorts of things, even funny things when he was young, but also talking about his father and his father's death. How difficult or easy was it to have him open up to you? Was it easy for him?
Well, first there was an architecture to start with, a hidden architecture, to put it this way, which was the idea of memory, all different forms of memory, whether it is the personal memory of his friends and family, irrigating his films. Does the word exist in English? No, at this time of the night.
Now it does.
Influencing the birth of his films. And then as he's registering that, he's also registering a country, a culture in movement, and therefore he's registering a collective memory. So those two layers of memories were clearly important to us. And then there's a third one that we added to this, which was the idea of bringing back a filmic memory, that is to invite him into the places, the locations where he had shot. And this is, I think, in effect, what ended up generating the possibility to think about where he lived, to think about family, to think about all, the references, the personal references that started surfacing. I have to say that I believe that you only start to do cinema, whether it is fiction or documentary, when you forget that you're doing cinema. In
What
the
do you mean
sense, in the
exactly?
sense that you have to forget where the camera is, that people have to be so concentrated on something that it's about registering life, and it's not about the act of doing cinema. You see, it's in this sense. I think that this is when something really tangible and truthful comes to the surface. And I had the impression that for the time we were with Jia, we forgot about that we were doing cinema many, many times. And this is, in great part, is thanks to him. Just to give you an idea, when he started to talk about his father, that wasn't preceded by a question. I didn't make a question. I had a, how do you say that, a translation? An earpiece allowing me to understand what was being said, either in Mandarin or in the Shanxi, dialect. And suddenly he started to talk, and I was fed what it was about. And the first thing to do was to keep the camera distant at that point and allow him to go. And the second thing was to stop that day once that part was over. I didn't continue to film because that was too, I would say, too important a moment to pursue it. I would say that one of the most difficult things to portray in cinema is fragility, and in documentary is to allow fragility to also to surface. And he somehow invited us into that specific territory, and you have to respect that, I think. And we packed. We went away. It was 4:00 in the afternoon, and the following day I said, "Is that something that this somehow you want to think about?" And he said, "No, I said it because I wanted it to be registered." I said, "Okay." And this is why it's in the film. And similarly, that moment in the coffee shop where he gets the information that A Touch of Sin is not going to be released in China was absolutely not anticipated. That was our last day of shoot in China, and we were in Beijing, and that moment was about celebrating a new film with his closest collaborators. And in that morning he received the information through the internet that the film had been that the film wouldn't be distributed. And that was the first time where I saw that he was truly concerned, and I opted also not to shoot. So we didn't shoot for maybe an hour or so, and then I went to him and I said, "Would you prefer me not to shoot today, because we've been so generous, we've got more than enough?" And he said, "No, that's my life. Please do shoot."
Well, that's
so
interesting,
that's the man.
because that scene, they're around the table talking, and then there is black, and you have a card up that says what happened, but then we do go back again, so that mirrors what you had done.
Because we didn't know, actually, I didn't know exactly what was happening either, like you guys, because that's the only day where the translator didn't arrive because it was a traffic jam. So I was completely lost. Actually, there's a good story about this in Fenyang. When I realized that, this is dialect. Went to the sound engineer who was from Beijing, and asked him, how much of the dialect are you getting? Are you getting? And he's saying, as much as you are. I said, okay, good. That's a good starting point. We're even here.
Here's a question here.
Yes, our future
So
in
who
China,
is the
I
audience
think,
you
is
have in
not
mind?
bright. I'm afraid to say. If you don't mind, I'm going to go back a few steps and say that I was brought to cinema by films and filmmakers many times, and I'm of course standing in line to see the Hitchcock Truffaut that Ken Jones,
The director of the New York Film Festival,
yeah,
Ken Jones, directed.
We can say that discreetly.
So we
But
weren't allowed to show it in the New York Film Festival.
But I'm also very moved that Ed Lachman is here, a friend Ed Lachman, who photographed
Ed
the film that was
Lachman.
very important to me.
DP extraordinaire.
DP extraordinaire of a film directed by Wim Wenders called Tokyo Ga on Ozu, which is masterful. It's such a poetic immersion in Ozu's film and respectful immersion in Ozu's film. And that film brought, I think, many friends of mine to cinema as well. So it may be true that films on films done by filmmakers on filmmakers may not be the ultimate blockbuster, but on the other hand, it can echo through time, and we can remember it as we're remembering Tokyo Ga here. And I think that cinema and memory, or cinema as a form of memory, as a form to instigating memory, is something quite important. So that may be one of the roles of the film, is what Jia Zhangke is doing is saying, this is how we were at a specific moment of time. I think that he may be the director who better understands the complexities of the time that we live in. Also because he's at the heart of the tornado. As I said in the beginning, no country changed so radically in 20 years, going from one form of orthodoxy to another form of orthodoxy, which is the orthodoxy of globalization. And nobody registered it as Jia Zhangke did, with so much sensibility and poetry and so much respect for his characters. He does care for his characters. And he doesn't judge his characters, which I find very hard to do and remarkable to do as well. So this is why the film exists. I'm sorry, I bifurcated a lot, so I have to apologize to you. But getting back, I have to say that the film exists because it, to dive into cinema, and that remember that cinema is a form to understand that the world is a little bit ampler than we thought it was, a little bit larger than we thought it was, is important. And this is what Jia Zhangke's films are about. So I'd love, in Brazil, for instance, people are rediscovering his films. That's something that, and I'm very thankful for the audience for that.
And I get the feeling also that you that you're not thinking what is your audience. It was just you had to
It's
make
a
this
personal need.
a personal need to make it.
As I think Wim had a personal need to, to grab Ed by the neck and say, together, let's do this film on Ozu, which was such an extraordinary idea. There's a beautiful film by Olivier Assayas on Hu Xiaoxian also, as we were talking about Hu Xiaoxian. Yeah, you liked it?
I think a lot of people
Okay,
did.
good.
Yes. Okay, actually, we're gonna do a few other people, and we'll get back to you because we have a lot of other questions to do before we're done.
There's one thing that I'd like to remember.
You can continue. He's got the answers, so he's allowed to keep talking.
Thank you. But there's one moment in that film that I especially love. It's Hu Xiaoshen enters into a garden. He says, this was a place I used to jump in when I was a kid, and there was a mango tree. And when I was 10 years old, I would go up on the mango tree. And from there, I had a completely different understanding of space and time. And this is perhaps what linked me to cinema. I decided to be a filmmaker because I could also have that singular point of view, which brings us back to the Ferris wheel, but let's not get into that.
It's like we did the Ferris wheel. So just a question really about editing and the sequence and how you shot them.
We shot, I wouldn't say chronologically, but based on again the memory of his films. So, starting with the locations of Pickpocket, which happened to be the very beginning of the film, and then, yes, we go into the world of platforms. So again, we're into that. But we stayed in Fenyang, which is really far. It's 600 miles away from Beijing, up there. You receive the winds of Ulaanbaatar coming over there. And we did everything that pertains to the world of those films. And then we went to Beijing to do The World, where he filmed, and to do the masterclass that you have in there. So the film is not chronologically constructed. Talking about, a large public or perhaps not as large a public, I have to say that the masterclass didn't exist 3 days before we filmed it. And Jia said, you wanted to film a masterclass in Paris and you ended up not getting the authorization. Would you like me to set up a masterclass? Here I said, yeah, but we're going to leave in 3 days. He said, oh, no problem. We'll do it. We'll do it. And I was wondering, will there be anyone at the masterclass? 3 hours later, there was a poster. There were 2,500 people inside the theater, and there were 4,000 people outside the theater. It was in November. It was temperature was around 38, perhaps Fahrenheit, and people were there all the time, waiting and actually listening to 2 hours of conversation. And it was truly extraordinary to see that urge to discuss and to actually talk about the possibilities of cinemas and cinematic ideas. And later that night, I said, I'm really really impressed by how fast you turned, that this became a possibility. And says, it's thanks to Twitter as well. I have a small amount of followers in the Chinese Twitter, which is called Weibo. Weibo, no? I think, yeah. Oh, there you go. And asked him, how many followers do you have? I said, not that much. I said, well, how many? 15 million. It's great to be independent filmmaker in China, I have to say, sometimes, but not all the time, but sometimes.
One way to get your audience, yes. So the question, to make it very short, because you heard it, is about not just your shooting in Brazil and traveling and shooting in China, and talk about, because this gentleman is interested in this idea of filmmakers traveling and shooting, and talk about the differences or similarities between doing that in Brazil or contrasting that in China.
Well, first, I think that the idea of movement, of course, is integral, is essential to cinema. It's part of cinema. It's not by accident that the first moving images taken by Muybridge, and some people call Muybridge, are already about the idea of of movement, horse galloping. So cinema for me is a form of a journey into the unknown, a form of journey into the unknown, whether it is in a geographical form or in any other kind of form, but it has to have to convey that possibility. I would say that in Brazil, because of the continental size of our country, I'm all the time facing unexpected situations, and I try to integrate them into the film. So it's not that is a culture and an environment that I fully control. In documentaries, I absolutely know I don't, but in fiction, I hope I will not. In the sense that I think that the fiction becomes alive once you truly have to access resources that you hadn't thought that, to start with. And I think that Jia talks better than I do about this when he says that he gets worried when something goes right, which is about the best thing you can show at a film school, I guess. You know. I had done a number of documentaries outside of the country, of my own country in the beginning. So, and it was my third journey to China. I have to let you know that as well. I was there when I was 16 years old. And then my brother did a 5 hours documentary on China, and I was there with him, and I edited the film. I spent 7 months editing a 5-hour series. And at the end of that series, we showed Chiang Kai-shek's film called Yellow Earth, which happens to be in the Shanxi province as well. So it's not that I was confronting a society I was completely oblivious of, or it was not an unknown territory for me. But Fenyang was a world that I totally did not expect to find. And first, you know, the not only the dialect, but the differences in how do I frame this in English? The differences of the geography, not only the physical geography, but even the faces, the human geography. They are so blatantly there that your senses are somehow heightened by this, you know, and you as a documentary filmmaker, you're completely absorbed by that reality and by the reality of those streets, if you want to, and that is the place that allowed me to understand that Jia is really a man in between cultures, an artist in between cultures, because he sees China from that specific point of view, that singular point of view. His films are spoken most of the time in a dialect that people who speak Mandarin would need subtitles as we do. You know, so I find artists who are in that specific position, that is to be able to understand a culture but see it from a critical distance, in a very advantageous position as well, you know, and that for me was part of the journey. So Jack didn't allow me to answer your question from beginning to the end, but that's almost that.
Yes.
I have to thank.
I just
Jia
wanted.
Zhangke
I'm going to repeat this just very quickly. I'm sorry. And well, the second part of the question is the song at the end is perfect. And how did that come about? And also, did you have any difficulties in filming that you want to talk about? I guess in many different ways.
Well, by now you know that the whole film was a pretext to taste Fenyang wine from the very end. I don't remember difficulties truly, because again, if there's one word that describes what you know, those 2 weeks that we spent there, was a sense of continuous excitement, you know, and the desire to integrate the unplanned, what was unplanned, and we were constantly confronting that. So I would say that specific moment. Many times we were asked not to shoot, like for instance in the train. There's the interview in the train. You know, the authorities, or however you want to call, you know, the people who set the rules inside the train, were all the time asking us to cut the camera, and I have to say we did not. And that's part of the of dealing with the unexpected. You have to somehow do that. I have to say that Jia was very, I would say, helpful in this. Yes, he would just say with a little go on. Also, the fact that we were a very small crew helped a lot. We were 3 to 4 people most of the time, so that created a very kind of collective, united group, and we learned a little bit like dancing. After a while, you know how to, collectively find your way around.
I just want to say, and I was thinking about something. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
we didn't get to the song.
The song, I had to thank Jia Zhangke for help. For I had never used so many pop music in any film that I've done before, and thanks to him, here we are. That's a song from Taiwan that he specifically likes, and we were listening to it in the car many times. So I said, okay, let's grab that to get and get at the end. So that it has to do with somehow the memory that we had of our journey, inside China.
Yes. So I'm just going to start by saying, and I won't be able to repeat this, and we have a good number of filmmakers. David Riker is here. This is Julia Solomonov. So, this is also the audience. It's always a conversation. And you were Walter's AD.
So basically, we were shooting one day in the beach, and we were burned by the sun. We took a plane and arrived in Bariloche and slept the night, and the next day we had a very regular schedule. But I woke up at 5 in the morning, and it was covered with snow. There was no snow in the diaries that Che Guevara wrote. So I was like, oh great, we have a day off. And Walter called me at 5:30 saying, did you see? We have snow. We have to go shoot. And of course we didn't have shoes to shoot. We didn't have jackets. We had nothing. And I think it's one of the moments that I really love about the film, that we went in the snow, and I'm sure you remember how it was, and we grabbed the snow. That was a great gift for the film. And I was after that I learned so much of when nature, life gives you this kind of opportunity to be aware, to be ready, to be alert, and to bring the crew to that, or bring that excitement of that gift that we had many times in that film. But that was that was a great lesson for me.
Well, I have to say, I think, you showed that kind of the stamina and fortitude in this film, and taking these moments and putting them together. And I think that's a great place to stop, since we do have to stop. Thank you very much for that, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
so
Walter,
much.
for
Thank
this
you.
wonderful, wonderful portrait.
Such a pleasure to talk
Thank
with
you, everyone.
Thank you very much.